And she would advise the rest of the ladies in the family, in the community, that look, you should go to this jeweler. This is what I'm wearing. He's trustworthy. The influencer of that time, so to say, you know. So I think it makes a difference, you know.
No, no. So what you are doing as an auction house and what Richa's doing as someone who's kind of sharing information that she's collected over the years and her knowledge actually goes a long way in helping people understand this at a different level. So certainly, to answer your question, I think both
Education
of you
is
are
very
playing
important. You have to educate the
a
client.
pretty big role in making people or sensitizing people to how, you know, how to buy jewelry, how to look at it, how to wear it, and all those, you know.
Right. Well, in my previous life, I used to market luxury cruises. And one of the things that I always would tell our team was that, you know, the customer, when they're buying a cruise, they don't mind paying the $300 more for the brand that you're promoting versus the other one, but they need to understand why. And I think that's where the art of communication, and I mean, we're calling it storytelling. Storytelling has become a very fashionable word now. But I think what it boils down to is clarity of thought and clarity of communication and clarity of expression. Also clarity in design, you know, to be able to communicate what it is that that necklace is supposed to represent. And when you're clear in your work and in the way you communicate your work, you know, it'll connect with the audience. And I think that's the, I think, fundamental aspect of good storytelling. So it's not just, like you said earlier, about producing a piece, but it's also, and we're living in times where it's so easy to communicate. I mean, you have your mobile phones, you can set up an Insta account, a LinkedIn account, you know, you can go on TikTok and reach out to so many people. But then you gotta hustle. There's no substitute to hard work and hustle, the 2H. So, okay, back to my list. And I wanted to talk about, I feel like, hold on, give me a second. There you go. This is my favorite part of this panel discussion. What do you think are some of the mistakes that you have seen on a no-name basis jewelers, jewelry artists, brands make, maybe mistakes you've also made in the past, which, you know, and I think we can learn a lot by not just talking about the good stuff, but sometimes you learn more by talking about the bad stuff. So what, according to you, are some of the mistakes that you may have seen or experienced yourself?
Too many. But I think the one, I won't call it a mistake, but the one learning is too often we, you know, for example, we've created this section which says the Select Club, right? And too often people think fine jewelry or design-led jewelry has to be expensive and big, right? I don't think that's the case. Very often people think, okay, if I mount a 10-carat solitaire or a 5-carat Burma ruby or whatever, that becomes high-end and you know, fine jewelry. And I get what Jai is saying about rarity, but sometimes jewelers don't realize, but we are playing advocates for someone else when you say, I've made this piece using the finest Zambian emeralds. I think it should, you know, we really need to kind of flip it around and let Zambia say that, listen, our emeralds go to Indian jewelry. I think the mistake we make is very often we're only talking about, I bought these pearls from Japan, I bought these emeralds from Zambia, I bought this ruby from Burma. Talk about yourself and what you've done, and don't kind of be so obsessed with making things expensive and big. And I think those are the mistakes I made right in the beginning when I was too focused on impressing people with scale, size, value, instead of focusing on the process. I think that's something that I've picked up over the last 15 odd years.
A valuable lesson indeed. What about you, Jay? What are your thoughts on some of the mistakes you've seen, and what makes you not pick a piece? Let's talk about that. Like when someone brings something to you, what is something that makes you be like, okay, this is not something that I'm going to pick to put in the auction?
So the way I look at things is I would put something which I know that I would put in my own store.
Okay.
You know, so it's a piece like it. A lot of times you have people who saying, "Can you please put my piece?" But if that's something that on any level I would not even think of including it at my store, I wouldn't do it.
But let's talk about why. What is it about certain pieces that puts you off?
For me, it's making. When I see something that's too blocky, you know, there's, back in the day, people would feel the heavier the piece of jewelry, the better it is. There's more gold in it, or there's more things. So for me, that's something I just don't resonate with. So it has to be finely made, firstly. Quality of stones is very important for me. So, sometimes, there's a piece of jewelry which has just everything, but there's no need for it. Less is more. This is what I believe, But if you put, say, emeralds, rubies, blue sapphires, mix it all up, but there's no fluidity to it, I feel that sometimes people try to get out of the box, but not realizing that they're tripping on their own feet, So for me, that's most important. It has to be a certain design. Again, like he said, growing up, when I was left out in the wild, so to say, to go and buy, the family would say, okay, you go buy, and that's the only way you learn. And you make mistakes like this, because you're starting out, you have no clue, and there may be something at that time which you like, but it just doesn't sell. Still have pieces bought 22 years ago, which are still sitting in my safe, and I know I'm not going to be able to sell them.
Right.
Unless we break it up and do something different.
Right. And I feel like nature is a great source of knowledge, and nature is a great way to train your eye. One of the things that I love doing in Singapore is going every morning when I can wake up for a walk in the botanic gardens. And what really takes my breath away sometimes is, just standing and looking at the leaves and the colors in flowers. And when you look at the color combinations in nature, they're so aesthetically pleasing. And I think if there's someone that you need to copy a color palette from, it really is a garden, because nature never gets it wrong, and there's some strange color combinations that you come across in a garden, which if you try and translate them, take mineral art, right, which is gemstones, and use those combinations, it works. And so I think we're talking about two different sort of art forms in that sense. We're talking about mineral art, which is the gift of Mother Nature, whether they are diamonds or colored gemstones, and how as human beings we can apply our skill to cut them, polish them, carve them, and then set them in a work of jewelry, which is the next dimension, which is what you're talking about, and to really bring together this effort to create a work of wearable art that will live beyond us, right? I mean, the ring that I'm wearing, that I'm holding this microphone with, is, if you look at the intrinsic value, it's a cameo by an artist called Amadeo from Toro del Greco, who's also a dear friend, and it's a carved sardonyx shell. The intrinsic value of this ring is minimal, yet many years ago, I paid a nice chunk of change for this ring, and I remember sending a photograph to my mom, and it's basically showing two skeletons looking at each other in a very loving embrace. And she looked at me and she was horrified. Being the good Punjabi mom, she's like, skeletons mat kharidna, how can you buy skeletons and wear it, apshagun hota hai and all that stuff. But I fell in love with the piece. To me, it was so romantic, and I bought it and I wear it all the time, and like brings me back to my original, again, it is in the eye of the beholder. If Amadeo had gone to my mother with the same ring, he wouldn't have been able to sell it, but he was able to sell it to someone like me. So, and I think that's where doing your homework beyond being self-indulgent and thinking about who is the person that I'm going to sell to, who is my customer, who am I creating this piece of jewelry for? A lot of times we get that wrong, not necessarily the piece. So you might have the right piece, but you might be selling it to the wrong person. And that's also something to think about. I think I've covered most of it. I want to open this up for Q&A. Any last thoughts before we close and open the floor for questions?
Last thoughts from me?
Yes, you, both of you.
Nothing. I think we've covered a lot, but I think there's a framework that most of us operate within in our industry. A good time to step back, look at the framework, and just try to step outside it. And also know that even though we get compared and we aspire to be artists and art, from the art world, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, it may not be the truth, even artists are very smart, commercially driven marketeers. So they've just done it exceedingly well. People who buy art, they may buy 10, 15, 20 paintings, only 3 appreciate like crazy. The other 7 generally don't bring any value to them. So while we all aspire to be artists, I think we must bear in mind that being commercially relevant and efficient and great marketeers is more important than anything else.
Any last thoughts, Jay?
No, I mean, we are trying to create a huge awareness for people to buy jewelry in auction. So what we try to educate to people, firstly, is transparency. That's the most important thing as a jeweler. I mean, me coming from a 4th-generation family, it's all about transparency, awareness. You know what you're buying, and we get everything certified, tested. So you know that there's a certain due diligence that goes into every piece. So now I've done 5 auctions with Asta Guru. And from the first one to where we are now, awareness is growing. People are open to looking. I never thought it would work, to be honest, because, we're very old school, touch, feel, see.
Yes.
But for me to see someone sitting in Orissa bidding on an Art Deco ring, I was pleasantly surprised. So, yes, it's an open market now, and people should consider, having a look at auctions now, for jewelry.
Absolutely.
And art is doing well in auctions.
Yes,
so.
exactly. Well, I think my final words before we open the panel to questions is there is a lot of wearable art at the IIJS. I mean, I had the pleasure yesterday of walking around. I started from the first row over there and worked my way through every row. And I was so impressed looking at manufacturers from Calcutta selling gold bangles handcrafted by artisans who are probably 4th and 5th generation artisans. Manufacturers from Bangalore, from Hyderabad, from Calcutta. And really, you can do a full tour of India. And in each booth, you will find incredible works of art. And it may be that maybe 10 pieces or 80% of the things in the booth may not fly with Jay, but 10% or 5% or 20% or 40% of things in that booth he would love and appreciate, right? And I think it's important to go across the length and breadth. Most of you are wearing comfy sneakers, and look at the small, independent, standalone exhibitors at the IIJS Signature, and congratulations to GJEPC for really putting together a fabulous show and for giving us the platform to talk about this very important topic. Thank you so much. And the floor is open to questions. Nobody wants to ask. I thought you had a lot of questions. Can we get a mic to the lady in the front row and the second row? So please introduce yourself and then go with
Hi.
it. First, the lady here with the fabulous pearl necklace and then the gold bangles. Sorry.
Thank you so much for such an insightful session. It was really eye-opening. We all are the artisans, and obviously we think this way. The way you guys are actually, you all have put it very beautifully. And I'm so glad to be here. So I have this question. What is your opinion regarding the contemporary material, regarding the metals? See, as you said, it's not about the intrinsic value of the piece. It's about how it is made and about the art factor, the design element. So the new contemporary materials which are there, the semi-precious stones, how do you see that growing up with the customers?
I mean, if I may kick things off and then I'll hand over to whoever wants to jump in. I mean, if you look at, I don't think there's anything semi-precious anymore. I think that it's an antiquated concept, precious and semi-precious. I think, especially when it comes to colored stones, I think when you look at, people ask a lot of times, what should I buy? And I always say, buy the best in whatever you can afford. It's better to buy a really high quality peridot than to buy a commercial grade ruby or a commercial grade diamond. So, sorry, what was your question? I got distracted.
So I was like, could you throw light on the new contemporary material?
The material.
Yeah.
So I want to give you an example of Hemele. Is Munich-based jewelry designer, considered one of the best in the world today, and most of the time they're not using gold, or they are using different materials. But what's interesting is that it's their interpretation, and I think each piece that they create does have an element of preciousness in there, whether it's incorporating an old artifact or an old sort of genuine antique or a little sparkle of diamond dust or some stones. Sorry, would you like to add something to that?
So I think preciousness comes from value in most cases, and value comes from economic value sometimes, most cases, and that comes from rarity. So I come back to the framework. If we start looking at the material and not the final product, then this question will keep repeating itself. And in today's time, like you said, there are alternative materials which are surfacing, and the most discussed one being lab-grown diamonds, right? I think semi-precious stones, lab-grown, cement, steel, aluminum, anything can be used to create something desirable. So I don't think that should be a conversation at all. The conversation should be about the craft you use to put it all together, whether the design is original or not. And Hemele is an absolutely fantastic example. I should have named them when you asked me earlier. I think they're the best example of how to make something out of really, basic material and still sell it at the highest possible value. So I hope that kind of answers my...
So I have that definitely.
Let's go to that lady and then we'll come back to you. Sorry, she's got a mic.
Hi, good
Hi.
afternoon. Thank you. What a wonderful conversation. My question is with regards to sustainability. How do you bridge that gap in terms of wearable art and jewelry? Maybe to all of you.
So can you define the question a little bit more? What do you mean by
what is
sustainability?
sustainability?
In terms of the process, in terms of how do you create value with the process when there are a lot of challenges that are being faced in the sustainability space?
Talking about like green jewelry? Something like that? Your carbon footprint, so to say?
Yes.
In making a piece of jewelry?
Yes.
Unfortunately in our business, unless you're making it out of plastic, something like that. But
No,
it's
listen,
a little tough to say.
I'm a little... we had this discussion last month in Jaipur, 2 months ago at the SIPJO conference, where we had certain international brands and their ESG representatives come in. And honestly, there's a lot of misinformation on this. I think there's a lot of greenwashing and
Absolutely.
too much discussion about sustainability in our industry.
Overused.
I don't know if you're aware of let's say mining, which is the most discussed aspect. Do you know how much of the Earth's surface is used for mining? Forget mining precious, mining anything. It's 0.1%. Right? So it's really not such a big deal in a very small industry. I think sustainability in fast fashion is a much bigger concern and a more relevant discussion than in our industry. The West is very fast to send us, you know, guidelines, which they can incorporate now because they've, you know, over the years kind of done whatever they had to. I don't think sustainability should even, it's too preliminary in our industry to even discuss. Don't read the headlines, in my opinion. Really get down to the facts.
I think
it's not, because you're setting, whether you set lab grown, you're setting it in metal. Metal is mined. Gold is mined by the same corporations that mine diamonds. So unless you're setting it in air, you have no option.
So my two bits on this is that I think we need to, like you said, sustainability is a word which is often misused. I think responsibility is a word which is a better fit. And because let's be real, if you're talking about stones, they're not sustainable, right? Unless you're growing them in a factory like diamonds, they're not lab grown, they're factory produced.
The carbon, because
Yes.
it's all about energy.
Yes.
It just doesn't add up. Because
All this comes under ESG, right? Or let's say social responsibility. In India, I think we have a greater responsibility towards employing people, educating people, giving them a means to an end, right? I don't think we should worry about what we are doing to, we should, but I don't think our carbon footprint is that big as an industry. I think if we are able to give people a job, you know, put food on the table, I think we've done our job. I think we've done what we have to.
I think what I would add to that is fair wage. You know, even today, I'd done a post on Instagram a few years ago when I was doing this whole series on Polki Kundan jewelry. And one of the things that I was highlighting is the price of gold from the 70s versus now, how that price of gold has increased, and comparing it to the wages that are paid to the artisans who actually do the kundan work to set that Polki diamond. And you know, looking at the disparity of that. So I think, which is where responsibility, we need to be responsible first. And responsibility in terms of fair wage, in terms of good working conditions. I mean, I travel to not just mines, but also manufacturing centers. In terms of mining, responsible mining, right? And responsible manufacturing, right? If you're walking into a gem cutting center or a jewelry manufacturing factory, is it well ventilated? If your staff is sitting and cutting stones, are they wearing protective gear of some sort, right? Or if they are not, then is that room well ventilated? Or are they 10, 20 years down the line going to have issues, respiratory issues? I think those are some of the things to be concerned about, which we are not focusing on. And we are focusing on paperwork. And CYA, which I will not translate. I think you can Google what the acronym CYA means. And I think that needs to come before. Paperwork is important. It's important. I'm not saying it's not. But I think you need to, like we have an exhibitor here who is going to be like zero carbon footprint by 2024. They're a diamond manufacturing facility in Surat, which I think is fantastic. It should be applauded. It should be acknowledged.
But it has to be, I mean, a lot of people are using eco-friendly, sustainable, clean origin. I think it's a very slippery slope.
Yes.
You can't use this just because it's a fashionable word. You really need to be able to back your claims up with absolute evidence. So that's second. First is, I don't think right now in India, all of us need to really discuss this. A lot of the brands that produce in India do not even say made in India. So if we're really talking about transparency and ethical standards, I think they need to start doing that first. I'm pretty sure there's tons of brands that manufacture in India and don't even mention it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand why they don't. And so a lot of, and it boils down to the perception of what made in India means. And that's changing, right? And it needs to change. And I think that's the only way that we'll succeed in the future.
That's a whole new seminar.
Yeah, that's a different seminar. Sorry. You've opened a can of worms. But thank you for your question. Any other questions? I have a flight to catch. I need to keep track of time. So wait, Shanu at the back, the very fabulous editor of Solitaire International.
Don't ask a difficult question, Shanu, please.
No, ask a difficult question.
Please.
And,
Sorry,
including...
say that again.
I love the concept of contemporary jewelry and using alternative material to create wearable art, just as Moksh has done in the past. They have, experimented with aluminium and gold. Fantastic. And Hammerley, of course, is my very favorite brand. My question is to Jay, that will you ever see a day where you can, auction these kind of pieces as well?
Of course, yeah, we're very open to it. I'll see you on Monday. So, no, we are open. We are open. It's
Check is in the mail.